Good morning, everybody. This is Imelda reading the newspaper for you this morning.
And good morning, this is Vivian also reading. We begin with society news for Friday the 13th of July. The Ryde Swimming Group are swimming this Tuesday the 17th of July in Ryde at the Waterside Pool. The pool is closed to the public whilst the group swims. There are male and female volunteers to help you get in and out of the pool, as well as lifeguards to ensure your safety. To join the dolphins, please call the society first to notify us of your swimming ability. On Wednesday, the weekly coffee morning will be held at Millbrook House, this Wednesday the 18th of July from 10:30. The coffee mornings are not just for blind and partially sighted people. Anybody can come along and have a cup of coffee or tea as well as a piece of cake. We will also be holding the low vision drop-in between 10 and 12 noon on Wednesday the 18th of July. This is a weekly event that allows you to view and try the low vision equipment we have at the Society without the need for an appointment. The Sight for Wight Members Forum takes place on Wednesday the 18th of July from 12 noon till 1:30 p.m. at Millbrook House. Further information will be given in any other news. The Wednesday social group will be meeting on Wednesday the 18th of July at 2 o'clock in Millbrook House. The entertainment this week is music and vocals by Short and Sweet. The group lasts approximately 45 minutes, which is then followed by tea or coffee and cake. Thursday. The Thursday social group are meeting on Thursday the 19th of July at Millbrook House. The group meets from 10:30 till 2. You can knit or just have a chat. Then later in the afternoon, volunteers come in and read to the group from different topics.
Any other news? Sight for Wight takes pleasure in inviting service users to a Sight for Wight Members Forum on Wednesday the 18th of July from 12 noon until 1:30 p.m. This will be held at Millbrook House. Please RSVP and send advance questions by the 16th of July 2018 or by phone on 522205 or email enquiries@iwsb.org. A message from the Talking News team. Please can we ask listeners to check if they have any extra talking news wallets at home. We have a number of listeners who are using only one wallet when there should be two wallets for each person in the system. If you have an extra wallet, please return them so that we can ensure a smooth and continuous supply for the Talking News each week. Thank you. And this is a message from Laura Jasper. Thank you to everyone who has replied to the consent form which was sent out last week. I've had a number of replies sent in the enclosed return envelope, which will have a postage stamp put on them. Please remember that we stamp all return envelopes with an Article for the Blind stamp, so you do not have to add extra postage to it. Just put it in a postbox or hand it in to the post office. Putting a stamp on it does not save the Society any money, as the Articles for the Blind system is provided free by Royal Mail. Thank you. The Isle of Wight National Health Service Trust are in the process of setting the clinical standards, and they would like to hear from you. Whether you are a patient, a family member, or a carer, they would like your views on what you would like to see change, improve, or develop. Some of the key ideas they are looking at are nutrition, end-of-life care, personal hygiene, respect and dignity, self-care and communication. They are holding a workshop on Wednesday the 25th of July 2018 between 9:30 a.m. and 12:30 p.m. in the conference room, Level B, St Mary's Hospital. If you would like to attend, please ring 822099 extension 3479 or email Beverley, Beverley, .sparks, SPARKES, at iow.nhs.uk by Monday the 16th of July. Local volunteers from the Guide Dogs charity will be visiting a number of venues over the next few months, talking about the work of the charity and how you can be involved. They will be at Ryde Library on the 21st of July and Ventnor Library on the 18th of August. All the library event times will be 10:30 a.m. until 2:30 p.m. You can also find them at the Isle of Wight Community Club Open Day at Park Road in Cowes on August the 27th from 12 noon onwards. Do you enjoy the activities and facilities provided by Sight for Wight? Perhaps you recently attended an activity or event that would like to wax lyrical about it. If so, then Chris Kane would like to hear from you. As part of our promoting well-being and supporting services and activities, we would like to hear your positive feedback, which will be part of a video promoting Sight for Wight. If you have a story you would like to enthuse about and don't mind being recorded on video, then please contact Chris Kane on 522205 or email admin@iwsb.org.uk.
Now we come to the scaffolding news. We are unable to include end dates as many are extended on a week-by-week basis. Also included are tables and chairs permits that have been issued in the past week. Bay and Ventnor area. There is currently scaffolding at Premier Inn, 1 to 9, Esplanade, Sandown. 11A and 11B, St John's Road, Sandown. The Toymaster, 103 High Street, Sandown. Scaffold up in Albion Road. United Reformed Church, High Street, Shanklin. Corner of Trinity Road and Madeira Road. Ventnor Boniface Road and into Trinity Road. Ventnor Hose Road, Dixon, 1 High Street, Ventnor. 21 West Street, Ventnor. There are currently hoardings at Premier Inn, 1 to 9, Esplanade, Sandown. United Reformed Church, High Street, Shanklin. There are currently skips at 5 Hill Street, Sandown. New scaffolding is due at Bar 64, High Street, Shanklin from the 23rd of July. Railway Bridge, Avenue Road, Sandown from the 10th of September.
And in the Cowes area, there is currently scaffolding at Sainsbury's, 129 to 30 High Street, Cowes, 91 High Street, Cowes, 93 High Street, Cowes, behind hoarding, 78 Park Road, Cowes, Exmouth House, Bath Road, Cowes, Carvel Court, Terminus Road, Cowes, also in Carvel Lane, 40 Osborne Road, East Cowes, and there are currently hoardings at 93 High Street, Cowes.
Newport area. There is currently scaffolding at 18 Lugley Street, Newport. 46 to 48 Lugley Street, Newport. Braunstone House, Lugley Street, Newport. Domino's, St James Street, Newport. Unit 2, 32 to 39 High Street, Newport. Hurst & Son, Lugley Street, Newport. Scaffolding up in Lugley Street and Holyrood Street. Age UK, 145 High Street, Newport. 17 Key Street, Newport. Sixth Form Campus, St James Street, Newport. New scaffolding is due at 114 Power Street, Newport from the 23rd of July.
And in the Ryde area, There is currently scaffolding at 4 St Michael's Avenue Ryde, Boots 170 High Street Ryde, McCall's 47 to 48 Union Street Ryde, 12 The Anchorage Seaview. There are currently skips at 39 Harding Road Ryde, 31 Osborne Road Ryde, Sand Cove Pier Road Seaview. New scaffolding is due at Hills Court High Street and Newport Street Ryde from July the 30th. And in West Wight area, there is currently scaffolding at the Memorial Hall, Avenue Road, Freshwater, and Jojo's School Green Road, Freshwater. And this week's In Touch. In Touch in this week's episode, useless subtitles and BSO resound. Too often, when watching TV news stories, foreign speakers get subtitles on screen, but there's no problem English translation. This leaves blind and visually impaired viewers struggling to comprehend huge swathes of international news reports. We put the frustrating experience of 2 listeners to the BBC's Head of Current Affairs, Joanna Carr, and ask a Head of Accessibility and Design, Gareth Ford Williams, for a commitment to change. We also hear from flautist Kate Risdon as she prepares for one of the biggest gigs of her career, a proms performance with the BSO Resound Orchestra, Bournemouth Symphony Orchestra's dedicated sextet of disabled performance. Tom Walter talks to her about how a top blind musician approaches performance and learning a score. And this is presented by Peter Wight and produced by Kev Core.
We now come to the Isle of Wight County Press headlines. The first item is Virus Ate My Face, and the second item is Bus Fare Shocker. Actress says illness left her suicidal. A Ryde actress has revealed how a rare flesh-eating virus, which twice attacked her face, left her on the brink of suicide. Lois Temmel, 44, who has just finished filming Desert River on the island, contracted B. hemolytic streptococcus, which causes the death of the body's soft tissue. Louis revealed strep is a type of internal necrotizing fasciitis which is quite rare. The surgeon thinks I got it after I was weakened following a car accident and picked up an infection similar to strep throat or scarlet fever, but a far more dangerous version. At first I didn't have any pain in my face. I just felt really run down and weary all the time. It took doctors a year to diagnose it after deciding to put a camera up my nose, and that was when I was told my face was empty. Lois underwent pioneering surgery and treatment at the Royal National Throat, Nose and Ear Hospital in London. The surgery was performed through her nostrils and throat, so her only scars are internal. She added they had got it all, but there is always risk it could come back, and it did return through bad luck. I just sneezed and blood started flowing out of my nose, and I looked down at my hand and there was a lump of tissue which turned out to be my septum. At one point I felt I did not want to go on with this life, but acting has given me a feeling of freedom. Lois continues to have regular procedures to inject collagen under her eyes and across the nose to fill the holes in her bones, and she is back in hospital again this week. She said, "My last surgery was 9 months ago, so things are definitely getting better. I've worked harder and done more this year than in the past 10 since this whole surgical process started. I've just finished Desert River, playing Linda Davids, the wife of a Royal Navy officer who develops post-traumatic stress disorder and substance abuse issues after being kidnapped while serving in the Gulf. A lot of the films was shot here with Island actors, and filming took place at Colwell Bay, Ryde, Puckpool, Battery, Seaview and Newtown Creek. And I also performed in a one-act play called Beery, playing Sue Beer, the wife of John Beer, who was sentenced to 24 years in jail for conspiracy to import 255 kilograms of cocaine.
Bus fare shocker. The annual cost of a privileged bus seat has more than doubled for some Isle of Wight parents. Privileged seats are for children who attend a school outside their catchment area, but do not travel on commercial bus routes. More than 500 children use this service. The system for applying for bus seats was opened last week. However, the price of tickets has risen by 37% on the previous year and now costs £130 a term. Parents are also no longer able to purchase just a morning or an afternoon seat. One parent from Bertner said the cost of sending her 2 children to Medina College Newport by bus has risen from £285 to £780 a year. Julie Hutchinson of Trinity Road said she had hoped to buy afternoon tickets, but as this option no longer available, she had to pay for a full-term ticket. She said, "I chose Medina because despite it being outside the catchment area, the art department is amazing and it suited my children a lot better." She said there was no explanation in the letter to parents as to why the price had gone up. Claire Flowers of Hawthorne Meadows, East Cowes, said she had also gone from paying £135 for one child a year to facing an annual bill of £780 for both their children to Carisbrooke College. She said, "It's actually cheaper for us to drive them both to school, so we will be adding to the congestion around the school." The tickets now cost the same as a Southern Vectis Freedom Pass, which covers more days, but a public bus wouldn't actually take them directly to the school. Another Ryde parent, who asked to remain anonymous, said it felt as if the council was punishing parents who chose to send their children to a school outside their catchment area. Cabinet members for Children's Services, Councillor Paul Brading, said the council had cut 4 routes from the service this year after looking at the contract with Southern Vectis. Councillor Brading said, "Parents who send their children to a school outside the catchment area should have to pay. The council don't have to provide the service. It's an expensive contract with Southern Vectis." Councillor Brading said the council was not profiteering from the price increase. He said, "I do accept it's expensive, but I do feel the price increase is justified."
Island ambulance staff attacked. Ambulance staff attending an emergency call were assaulted by a member of the public. It was one of 2 incidents in June. On the same weekend, police were called to the emergency department at St Mary's Hospital to an incident involving an intoxicated member of the public. The incidents were reported to the Isle of Wight NHS Trust board members last Thursday. In March, the head of NHS England revealed a third of ambulance staff said they had faced violence from patients, relatives or the public during the previous 12 months. A spokesman for Isle of Wight NHS Trust said, "We take a zero-tolerance approach to physical and verbal abuse of our staff." With regards to incidents which occurred during June in the emergency department at St Mary's and elsewhere on the island when one of our ambulance crews responded to an emergency call, we are working with the police with a view to prosecution for any criminal behaviour. Therefore, it would not be appropriate to comment any further on these incidents at this time. Speaking in March at the Royal Ambulance Forum, head of NHS England, Simon Stevens, said he wanted to see the maximum punishment for every violent offence against paramedics. He said, "We cannot have a situation where a third of ambulance staff are on the receiving end of this kind of behaviour, let alone the 47% of ambulance staff who say they have been harassed or bullied by members of the public."
Hot weather puts crops under threat. The hot weather has taken its toll on farmers who have resorted to emergency measures to save failing crops. And if the dry spell continues, the Isle of Wight National Farmers Union, NFU, warned the impact could be catastrophic. Emergency irrigation has been carried out across the island, but not all farmers have access to reservoirs and some have already run dry. Agricultural yields are expected to drop by a quarter, and due to a lack of grass, livestock farmers have started dipping into their animals' winter food stores. Safety concerns have been raised following several fires on tinder dry farmland, including one at Apps Heath on Wednesday, which saw a fire caused by a hay baler spread to 4 acres of field. Isle of Wight NFU Chair Max Legg said, "Everyone is working hard to keep the crops alive, but apart from irrigation, there is very little you can do. If the dry spell continues, extraction from reservoirs might be restricted. Supplies are only going to last so long. If they run out, it could be catastrophic. It's too early to tell how bad it will be, but yields are certainly going to be down, maybe by 25%. Market prices will go up if there are shortages, though, so it should balance out a bit." Farmer Chair Caroline Knox said it was not cost-effective to irrigate low-value crops such as wheat and barley, leaving farmers at the mercy of the heavens, while potatoes would not grow in high temperatures. Caroline, whose ex-husband John Knox has around 300 acres of island farmland, supplying to McCain chips and UK crisp manufacturers, said potato yields could be halved from 16 to 8 tonnes an acre, prompting fears of a national crisp shortage. Urging people against lighting bonfires, barbecues or sky lanterns, she said, "It's a stressful time in what has been a really tough year. The land is fragile. For a sky lantern to land in a field of animals or a farmer to lose the crops he or she does have to fire would be disastrous."
Council tax up again next year. The Isle of Wight Council has made additional savings of £5 million this year, but council tax will still go up next April. A report to the Council's Scrutiny Committee on Tuesday said the overall revenue budget looks set to underspend by £2.9 million. However, Cabinet Member for Resources, Councillor Stuart Hutchinson, confirmed the final figure was closer to £5 million. The revenue budget includes money spent on the floating bridge, children's services, adult and social care, among other ongoing expenses. Council leader Councillor Dave Stewart welcomed the news and said the savings had been made due to good management of council finances. Councillor Hutchinson said, "You might say we will not have to increase council tax at all next year. Well, yes, we shall. We have still got £16.5 million to find over the next 3 years. An awful lot of what we do is actually quite technical. At the end of the day, all the public see is the increased cost of the council tax. Last year, council tax rose by 6%, with the additional 3% used to fund adult social care. Councillor Hutchinson confirmed an additional 3% rise would not take place next year. He said the council tax increase would cover inflation and the £5.5 million would be found by reducing expenditure, reducing services and increasing income. Every year the saving you have to make gets more difficult because you have already made £75 million in savings, which is a huge amount for a small council. That's why we are having to re-engineer what we do.
And this is on a similar theme. Council spends £500,000 paying off staff. The Isle of Wight Council has spent more than £500,000 on settlement agreements with schools and council employees in the past 5 years. A Freedom of Information request revealed since 2013 the authority has agreed 41 settlement agreements with payments totalling £570,208. Of these, 16 payments were for school employees and 25 for council staff. When asked to explain the breakdown of payments or justify why they were made, the council declined to comment. They said providing further information would make the individuals involved too identifiable. Cabinet members for Resources Councillor Stuart Hutchinson also declined to be interviewed. Chief Executive of the Taxpayers Alliance John O'Connell said, "For a small council this is a staggering total. Settlement agreements can sometimes have merit, such as by avoiding lengthy and expensive employment tribunals. Nevertheless, all efforts should be made to limit these payments, and the council should be more transparent about why they feel the need to agree to so many."
And on a similar theme, temporary staff to plug gaps cost £1.5 million. More than £1.5 million has been spent on agency staff at the Isle of Wight Council over the past year. Agency staff have been used to cover sickness, maternity leave and to plug gaps in departments across the authority. In some cases, specialist staff have been brought over from the mainland, with the council covering ferry costs and accommodation. Between May 2017 and May this year, the authority spent £1,526,816 on agency staff, particularly within the mental health team and children's services. In May alone, the most recent month available to view, the authority spent £119,710 on agency staff. The highest monthly spend was in April this year, with £205,120 spent. The lowest spend was September 2017, with £46,356 spent. Since December 2017, the amount spent on agency staff has been steadily increasing, with figures averaging £150,000 per month. Deputy Council Leader and Finance Cabinet Member Councillor Stuart Hutchinson said he was not surprised by the figures. Councillor Hutchinson said, "We spend more than £50 million annually on our directly employed staff, and this accounts for about 3% of that. Of course, that seems a lot, but even a small council spends a very large amount of money. Our gross budget is about £450 million. He said a lot of the money was spent on staff in mental health services and to plug the gaps in social services. We want to keep the services running, he said. Labour councillor Julie Baker-Smith said the high spending was worrying and should be investigated. She said, "It concerns me that Conservatives are employing staff on a temporary basis without giving them job security, many of whom I'm sure will be on 0-hour contracts, living from week to week."
Boat firm to stay on the Isle of Wight after takeover. 2 former business managers at South Boats Isle of Wight have bought the firm's assets and equipment, securing jobs at the Medina Yard site. After paying an undisclosed sum, Ben Coleman and Mac Floyd will transfer everything, including the firm's employees, to their new company. As Diverse Marine, they will continue to be based at Medina Yard, Cowes, with a 3-year lease in place, offering the same commercial vessel repair and refit services. Concerns were raised about the future of South Boats Isle of Wight in May, following news operations were moving to the Norfolk headquarters of its sister company, Alicat Workboats. But Mr. Coleman said on Wednesday, "We are delighted to announce the completion of the purchase and formation of Diverse Marine, and we are overwhelmed by the support from clients, suppliers and wide marine industry as we take the company into the future. This is enormously positive news for all the families of staff involved and for the island's marine industry. We have a strong vision for the future and have started to map how we may get there. The support and integration of our team as the company steps on this path is very important to us. Starting afresh and leaving the past behind has been invigorating for everyone involved. Working with Naval Architects Diverse Marine is developing a new portfolio of commercial vessel designs, including ribs, fishing boats, workboats, and wind farm crew transfer vessels."
Dog cut by broken glass on beach. Poor Daisy, who needed stitches after slicing her paw on broken bottles which were left on Binstead Beach. Her owner, Sally Wight, who lives in Binstead, is keen to raise awareness about the dangers of leaving rubbish behind. Sally said, "On Monday afternoon, my father-in-law Roger took my dogs to Binstead Beach, as it is shaded there. He took Bonnie, my 11-year-old border collie, and Daisy, who is a 23-month-old sprolly, who with her Springer Spaniel genes loves to explore. Due to gross incompetence from beachgoers leaving broken bottles on the beach, I came home to a bloodbath. I am a qualified dog first aider and managed to clean the wound with Ceylon, but I knew instantly she needed stitches. The vets at both Ryde and Newport Pet Doctors were amazing, and Daisy was operated on only a couple of hours after arriving. The pad on her paw had been badly sliced. She now has her entire leg in a bandage and needs medicine to prevent infection. She is still very much in pain and very sleepy. Her ordeal would have cost £800 if we hadn't been insured, but if I'm honest, seeing the pained expression on her face is worse than a big bill. I'm absolutely certain it was caused by broken glass. My sister's terrier was injured this time last year at that beach. It is frequently used by campers throughout the summer. The amount of rubbish left behind is sickening. There are some good people who use that beach that pick up some of the rubbish every day, but sadly the majority leave broken glass, disposable barbecue grills, food and human waste scattered across the beach. Please pick up your rubbish and take it home with you.
Gender pay gap at Isle of Wight National Health Service Trust. Men working for the Isle of Wight NHS Trust are paid 19% more than women. The gender pay gap at the Trust is higher than the national average of 16.1%. A report to the Trust Board last Thursday showed the pay differences in average pay between men and women. This is not the same as equal pay, as it is unlawful to pay people who carry out the same or similar jobs unequally due to gender. The report showed the average hourly rate for men was £18.27 compared to £14.78 for women. While 75% of the workforce was female, they were earning less than men. The report said one reason for this could be women are leaving the Trust earlier than men. Women who return from maternity leave tend to return to fewer hours. Therefore, females are not remaining in the trust employment long term in order to benefit from the annual pay increments. The trust said it was committed to reducing any unjustifiable gap in pay between men and women.
Early bath for little duckling. Freshwater independent lifeboat crew were called into action to rescue a swimmer experiencing difficulty in the bay last week. The swimmer was an abandoned duckling in distress, and it nearly drove them quackers as they tried to get it onto dry land. Trainee coxswain Richard Barton-Wood said, "As we were finishing our training session, a lone duckling was spotted in the bay by one of the crew. We scoured the area but couldn't find any other ducks, so it had obviously been abandoned. Some people did try to get close to it, but it just swam further out. Fortunately, one of our crew had his own boat on the beach, so he went out and coaxed it back onto dry land. Some hungry gulls were circling in the sky, and I didn't think it would last the night. So I managed to pick it up and took it home, where we made sure it was safe and fed. The following day we were looking to rehome it, and my wife Sam's hairdresser Christina came to the rescue. She has a menagerie of animals and birds, so she has taken it in, and we can report that it is doing very well. There is also a pond there. If it wants to fly away when it is older, then it is free to do so. The duckling has been happily swimming in Christina's bath and will be released when he gets bigger."
Lovely. Sometimes when I'm alone, I cry. Trapped in his house during evenings and weekends, a Newport man whose care allowance has been cut to less than 1/3 of what it was has spoken to his battle with the Isle of Wight Council. Dean French, 53, of Westminster Lane, has cerebral palsy and is in a wheelchair. He has been a receptionist at the Riverside Centre for the past 30 years. His personal budget has been reduced to 30% from 70 hours to 21 because he said the council counted his time spent there as a social activity rather than employment. As a result, his nighttime support has been removed, leaving him trapped in his house and isolated from friends during evenings and weekends. "Sometimes when I am home alone, I just sit and cry," he said. "I can be in my flat from Friday evening when I get home from work until Monday morning. I've been in a wheelchair since I was 3 years old. Nothing is going to change, so why has my personal budget changed?" Dean says he feels he will have no choice but to move into residential care if this continues. His friend, 63-year-old John Armstrong from Ventnor, said he had noticed a significant change in Dean since his care was cut. He said he is increasingly tearful and gets upset easily. It's really taking a toll on his mental health. It's self-defeating because the council will have to pay more if he moves into residential care. Dean said he no longer had the freedom to go to dinner with friends or go to the cinema with a carer. Most evenings he has to be home by 9:30 and be helped into bed. "If I want to stay out later, then I have to stay awake all night, as I'll miss my carers," he said. The removal of carers overnight happened with minimal notice, he said. A letter Dean received from the Isle of Wight Council said he did not need the overnight care and instead was giving a white care alarm. Dean said, "If I soil myself, instead of having someone nearby, I may have to wait for hours for someone to come to help me. They've taken away my dignity." A council spokesman said they would not comment on individual cases. "We can confirm our social workers work hard to ensure all the facts and circumstances around an individual are gathered, using independent advocates wherever necessary before they propose any change in someone's support plans. All changes to someone's care plans and support arrangements are then checked and challenged at a weekly panel meeting. Should someone remain dissatisfied, there is an internal appeal process. Should the person remain dissatisfied, they can take their case to the local government ombudsman. Undertaking reviews in a comprehensive and responsible manner is a responsibility we take.
Union removed from St Mary's. Trade union representatives were escorted off the St Mary's hospital site after trying to speak to staff. GMB officials said they had been asked by members and concerned staff to attend St Mary's Hospital to discuss bullying and harassment, organisation, high workloads and staff shortages. They said 3 representatives were prevented from talking to any members of staff and from giving out information and a staff survey by on-site security. The officials were then escorted off the site. However, the Isle of Wight NHS Trust said staff complained about the assertive behaviour of the union representatives who were interrupting their work caring for patients. GMB regional organiser Adrian Baker said staff are still feeling pressure from being overworked. Mr Baker said bullying was endemic and growing. Complaints were not taken seriously and staff making complaints faced obstacles. Staff end up feeling even more bullied, ostracised and alone, so they called the GMB to help and step in. Unfortunately for them, they've picked the wrong union to try such heavy-handed bullying tactics with. The Isle of Wight NHS Trust said the GMB had not asked for formal recognition. Julie Pennycook, Director of Human Resources and Organisational Development at the Isle of Wight NHS Trust, said, "We make facilities available to a range of recognised unions and professional bodies. They hold awareness-raising activities around trust buildings, and we support their communication with their members in a variety of ways. It is important staff are appropriately represented and representatives are appropriately supported. However, union and professional body activities cannot interfere with patient care. While I am very happy to meet representatives from the GMB, they have not, as yet, formally asked to be recognised, nor were they willing last week to tell us how many of our staff they represent." Mrs Pennycook said trust security staff attempted to discuss the issues with the representatives, but when the representatives would not cooperate, police were asked to intervene.
Isle of Wight campaigners in London March. Islanders took to the streets of London to celebrate NHS 70. Members of the Isle of Wight Save Our National Health Service campaign joined a celebration and demonstration organised by the People's Assembly and Health Campaigns Together. Christine Lightbody from Isle of Wight Save Our National Health said, "A group of islanders brave the sizzling temperatures to travel to London to celebrate 70 years of the NHS. Tens of thousands of campaigners from across the country also vowed to continue their fight to save this wonderful public service from being dismantled, privatised and sold off. Members of the group visited towns across the island last week, gathering signatures on a giant handmade birthday card to celebrate the National Health Service. The card was presented at the Past, Present, Future National Health Service event at the Riverside Centre, Newport, on Wednesday." Well, I think that's the end of us for today. So Imelda wishes you a very happy weekend. Hope it isn't too sizzling. And bye-bye for now.
And it's goodbye from me, Vivian. Have a lovely weekend.
Good morning, I'm Stephen.
And I'm Madeline.
And we'll be reading the letters and features of the County Press for you this week. Starting with a letter from Terry Hack of Bryston, headlined "New Balls Please," and this is the County Press letter of the week. Halfway through my 8th decade now, I swore I would not become tetchy, but I'm failing. The unlikely culprit? My beloved Wimbledon tennis, hitherto a bastion of good taste, gentility and sportsmanship. But a few years ago, highly unpleasant trends appeared. The first emanated from the women, crass, quite unnecessary screeches, which have become louder and more grotesque each year. I fully understand the short explosion of air expelled when hitting a ball forcefully, but this year, women were still emitting the scream when the ball reached the far end. Then, after gaining a point, we began to see from the men the aggressive fist accompanied by a gaping mouth the size and shape of mating hippos. But what really jars are the doubles matches. Nowadays, after each point, the men have to touch hands. What a pointless gesture. This year, 2 male players replaced this with leaning in towards each other so their chests briefly touched. Yuck. But most bizarre of all are the absurd conversations with the hands covering the mouth, so those opponents who can lip read won't know what they're saying. Forget Brexit failing. When Wimbledon fails, civilization as we know it will fall too.
Isle of Wight to remain in EU after Brexit happens. This is from Bob Hurst of East Cowes. In the light of the current state of Brexit negotiations, I feel I should share the following information. My previous career was legal research. Some while ago, I volunteered my services to the Isle of Wight Council as part of their future planning on Brexit and its effects on the island. I recently advised the chairman of the Brexit Committee the Isle of Wight is not covered by the Section 50 application to take the UK out of the EU. He took some convincing, but close examination of ancient records held at County Hall revealed that in 1066, when William the Conqueror, Duke of Normandy, invaded Britain, the Isle of Wight was not part of Britain, but had long been included in the Duchy of Normandy, and therefore part of what is now France. This had its roots going back to Roman times, when the island was known as Vectis, and never part of the mainland Britain. So when William invaded, landing at Pevensey, near Hastings, he was already ruler of the Isle of Wight. When planning the invasion, his courtiers had advised him he owned the island, and he changed his original plans to land in Sandown Bay, to avoid upsetting the islanders who owed him their allegiance. Therefore, the Isle of Wight, under EU rules, is technically still part of France, and will not be leaving Europe. I understand the Council is making plans to issue all residents of the Isle of Wight with special EU passports, and celebrations are underway by those islanders who voted Remain. Jovially yours.
And now a letter from Ali Hind of Newport, headlined Plastic Peril. I had a wonderful time at the festival, great atmosphere, and of course the wonderful weather. However, I cycle through Seaclose Park daily, and was saddened to see plastic ticker tape had been released in the main arena, and after a week of site clearing, this is still here, and has spread around the park and probably also landed in the river. Plastic has been very much in the headlines recently, and while I appreciate it can take time to implement a plastic-free environment, but this is so unnecessary. This affects our local wildlife, rivers and seas. Birds, fish and animals are at risk, and they may consume these tiny pieces of plastic.
A public hero, from John Horsnell, former Isle of Wight County Council Chief Exec, from Ormskirk. At a time when the island countryside will be at its most inviting, may I recall the efforts of the man who helped to make it so. The late Jim Reid worked for the County Council for many years, rising to County Surveyor with responsibility for Isle of Wight roads and much else. Perhaps his biggest job was Newport's Eastern Relief Road along the line of the river and old railway, but his passion was the countryside. He regularly won funds to install viewpoint car parks, and above all, supported by colleagues such as Eddie Leal and Tim Slade, he developed the footpath network which is so well regarded. Jim, who died on the mainland a few years ago, was a dedicated public servant whose work lives on.
And now a letter from John Pitcher of Dover, headlined, Isle of Wight transport much better than in Dover. The island is a great place to visit. Superb coastal scenery, even white cliffs. Hundreds of foot passengers arrive every day on the ferries, and thanks to transportation integration, onward journeys by train or bus couldn't be easier. I arrived at my destination at about 8:30 p.m, and although the information office was closed, copies of bus timetables were thoughtfully left outside. Though there have been cutbacks in rural areas, there are frequent buses between the main towns which run until late evening, including Sundays, and some services, I'm told, run even on Christmas Day. Litter and dog mess are rare, and public toilets, though some have closed, are still adequate in the main centres. It sounds quite like my hometown of Dover, but only in some respects. But at least we have our high-speed rail service, of which I'm sure the Isle of Wight and everywhere else are highly envious. And our coast and countryside can compete. Although thinking of the great selection of pubs and eateries at our disposal, I suppose there are a lot worse places than Dover after all, so I shan't be emigrating just yet. I may be being frivolous, but let me explain. When passengers arrive on foot from Calais to Dover, they don't have an easy time. The bus taking them from the ferry to the railway station was withdrawn about 3 years ago, and the port is not served by local buses either. People have to find their own way across town to the railway station or main bus stop about a mile away. In short, arriving in Dover as a foot passenger should not be undertaken by the faint-hearted. New bus timetables are available online for those who can find them, but in print they're in short supply or non-existent, even now, a month after they should have been provided. In the evenings and on Sundays, services are few and far between, with large urban areas as well as rural communities having nothing at all.
Sandown is poor relation of your island's lovely towns, from S.J. Green and A.B. Collins of Liverpool. We have just returned from 5 days staying on the beautiful Isle of Wight, but feel we must write and say, wake up, Sandown Town Councillors. What a shambles the town is compared to other Isle of Wight towns. The hanging baskets on the lampposts in the High Street are empty. Ragged and torn flags hang from one side of the road to another. There are empty and boarded up shops and a pile of rubble, with plants growing out of it, opposite the library. We felt sorry for the people who live nearby, who are trying to keep their properties looking spick and span and putting hanging baskets on show. No fine displays of flowers in the town, as there used to be. We were told that is left to a few volunteers to provide. We noticed that Ventnor, Shanklin and Ryde have good displays of flowers. Why not Sandown? All along the front, walking to Yaverland, weeds are in abundance, so unsightly. By contrast, Ventnor Municipal Park is magnificent. Broken fences at Brown's Golf. Who owns that now? Sorry, but the beautiful town of Sandown is rapidly becoming a disaster and a mess. Please attempt to stop the decline before it is too late. We will think before visiting it again.
And now a letter from John H. Wight of Totland, headlined Flannel Shorts and Caps in My Day. With regard to your story in the County Press of the 6th of the 7th about uniform restrictions at Christ the King College, it's interesting to note how fashions change over the years. Back in the 1940s, most of us in our grammar school wore grey flannel shorts with our school blazer up to about the age of 15, before changing to long grey flannels. Those parents like mine, who couldn't afford the expensive school blazer from the official outfitters, were allowed to buy a cheaper one elsewhere of the same colour and sew the school badge onto it. It went without saying that we were all expected to wear the school cap when in uniform. One doesn't see many school caps around these days. During my teaching days, around 40 years ago, at a further education college, some of my younger yet more senior colleagues went around in scruffy jeans. I used to reckon that 40 years previously they wouldn't have been accepted as students. I suppose these trendy sociologists, etc., probably thought the chemistry I taught was rather reactionary.
Ember danger from George Davis of Lake. Hilary Curtis wrote regarding bonfires during the summer months in last week's County Press. It is a very difficult problem to sort out officially, as we have found out. We have a neighbour here in Lake who has weekly, sometimes twice weekly, bonfires which choke the neighbourhood, much to the distress of elderly and asthmatic folk nearby. The last few fires have caused hot embers to descend onto surrounding parched gardens and properties. Despite numerous requests to cease in the summer, they still continue. The person in question still generates noxious fumes and clouds of smoke. There doesn't seem to be any official who is willing or able to curtail this.
And now a letter from Molly Dodd of Newport, headlined, What do we pay our rates for? I thought on a lovely hot Sunday I'd take my visitors to one of Newport's beauty spots, with lovely shady trees and babbling streams. We read the notices depicting what to expect as we entered under the arch of the bridge, averting our eyes from the Matalan trolley in the stream. We came to the first information board advising us to look out for water voles and different birds. Unfortunately, it failed to warn us of the huge stinging nettles on the riverbank, in places we ever wondered if there was a stream there at all. Another notice board told us about the living grass eaters, presumably meaning sheep. Even sheep, unfortunate enough to have been put in such a thistle-riddled field, would have been ashamed. Is this another cutback to go with non-existent loos, dirty streets and closed amenities? Whatever do we pay our rates for, I ask myself.
Democratic decision from John Board of Bembridge. It's unclear which rules Councillor Marianne Sullivan believes the mob broke in the conduct of the recent Bembridge parish poll, when hundreds of voters decisively rejected plans to sell 5 to 7 High Street. The poll was carried out under the provisions of local government legislation and overseen calmly and professionally by Isle of Wight Council Elections Manager Clive Joynes. The authenticity of the result on a respectable turnout is incontrovertible. It's sadly not legally binding, but that's not the same as being unofficial or irrelevant, and certainly not the same as mob rule. Councillor Sullivan, during her term as PC chair, had an opportunity to put a stop to behaviour which more closely matches that description. She failed to do so, and the secrecy, tribalism and bullying continue, as does the arrogance now demonstrated by rejection of the result. More and more villagers are coming to realise what's going on in their name and are no longer being fooled. The fight to save 5 to 7 High Street for Bembridge isn't yet won, but it's not lost either.
And now a letter from Jeremy Westmore of Wooton Bridge, headlined, Festival Idea. I would like to give my belated congratulations to John Giddings and his team on this year's Isle of Wight Festival. It was busier than ever, which made things a bit difficult at times, but the excellence of the organisation involved cannot be denied, and a good time was had by all, I would suggest. The gold clothing suggestion for the Saturday to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the first festival worked out very well, with large participation. My effort was a feeble gold chain, however. Next year, it is of course the golden anniversary of the 1969 Wooton Festival, which was headlined by Bob Dylan. I wonder if John has a special plan to celebrate this. Dylan wore a white suit at Wooton, and so perhaps a white and gold theme could be adopted for the Saturday. Just an idea. Keep up the good work, John.
And this is from Alan Marriott, the editor of the County Press. It is with a heavy heart I have to announce the departure from regular CP cartooning of Rupert Besley. Rupert has been with the County Press nearly as long as I have, and his decision to call it a day after 30 years of lampooning politicians and other Isle of Wight great and good, as well as just making us laugh, is one I have tried to talk him out of. However, all good things must come to an end, and I have at least extracted from him the compromise of him occasionally submitting a cartoon to fit a particular occasion. He is, in my opinion, one of the best newspaper cartoonists in Britain, and his acerbic wit will be impossible to replace, I think. Happy retirement, Rupert.
And now the looking back column, starting with events of 100 years ago on July the 13th, 1918. Two boys, Fred Lobb, who's 17, and Reginald Blake, 16, were charged with stealing 2 tamed rabbits from an East Cow's back garden. Mrs. Wilkinson, the victim, said she had been keeping a number of rabbits, each worth about 10 shillings. When charged, Lobb said, "I was going to keep it for breeding. I took it to him under my jacket so my mother didn't see it." And an exciting scene was witnessed at Cross Street in Cowes when a crowd watched an agile boy cross the roofs of the terraced houses. The boy was remanded in custody and charged with breaking into the international tea stores and stealing salmon and dates. He had climbed up through the skylight before running away across the roofs from a policeman.
And 75 years ago, on July the 10th, 1943, the fire service was called to a large outbreak of fire in a copse in Godshill on Sunday. Some difficulty was experienced in reaching the scene, and the crew worked tirelessly for more than 6 hours to put out the blaze. And in his letters home, Private Roy Green, originally of Carisbrooke, had often expressed disappointment he had not come across other islanders while serving with the 51st Division in Tunisia. He was rewarded by meeting 2 islanders, his brother and stepbrother, and they spent 2 days together in North Africa. He first heard the ship on which his brother was serving was in a port 50 miles away, so he travelled, found him, and had a great time on board.
And 50 years ago, on the 6th of July 1968, the schooner yacht America, a full-scale replica of the yacht which gave her name to the America's Cup races, left Bermuda on a goodwill visit to Cowes. America was set to sail the Atlantic to the island to celebrate the fact it had been built to the design of an island company, and its predecessor had gained its great triumph in the town nearly 100 years previously. The Vectis Shipping Company of Newport came to the rescue and delivered islanders their papers when no British rail trains or ferries were running. The shipping company arranged with newsagents to collect all island papers at Portsmouth and convey them to Cowes in their 65-ton barge. The papers arrived in Cowes at 6 a.m, an hour earlier than usual.
And 25 years ago, on July the 9th, 1993, a young Russian orphan who arrived on the island unable to speak a word of English passed the tough Trinity College London speech exam with flying colours just a year later. Irina Mitina, 10, gained 88 points and came 4th out of her 71 fellow pupils who took the 2-part exam intended for English speakers. The teachers at Bembridge spoke of their pride that was tinged with sadness as Irina travelled back to Russia. And the Princess Royal praised the Isle of Wight's sports facilities when she officially opened the island games at Carisbrooke Castle. The Princess, expressing her pleasure at being the game's patron, said future generations would benefit greatly from the sporting experience.
And 10 years ago, on July 11th, 2008, the height of the wind turbines planned for the environmentally sensitive Cheverton Down were more than double the size of those already approved. At 125 metres tall, they would have been 30 metres higher than Big Ben, and only 45 metres smaller than this Spinnaker Tower. The new height was revealed by renewable energy company Cornwall Light and Power, which planned to make a joint application with Vestas. and also Haven Street Station was transported back in time to when it was part of a thriving railway network playing its part in the war effort.
And moving on to Wight Memories, The Demise of Regional TV by Alan Stroud. What's on the other side? Well, if you know what that means, you're probably of a certain age. It dates from the days when there were only 2 television channels. Today's children would probably need counselling just thinking about it. BBC television had begun in 1938 for viewers in the London area, but islanders on high ground with deep pockets and big aerials could also tune in, weather permitting. In 1954, television came to the island officially when the Rowridge transmitter opened, but it is fair to say exciting was not the word for the programmes in those early days. Viewers were not exactly hungry for violin recitals or documentaries on the megalithic tombs of Ireland, both of which appeared in the first week. So it was no surprise when ITV arrived in the south in 1958. In the form of Southern television, it was an instant success. Dullness and drear were banished overnight as Robin Hood, Popeye and Take Your Pick burst into our living rooms. Southern Television, the bearer of these exotic delights, was owned by 3 shareholders who had one thing in common. They were frightened by commercial television. Step forward the rank organisation. Frightened people would stop going to the cinema. The Daily Mail, frightened of losing advertising to television. And D.C. Thompson, owners of the Beano and Dandy, frightened children would abandon comics in favour of television. It was a classic case of, if you can't beat them, join them. From its studios at Southampton, Southern came on air at 8 p.m. on Saturday, August the 30th, 1958. And over the next 21 years it made programmes that are still remembered today. Out of Town How, Wurzel Gummidge and Day by Day became a part of life, bringing Cliff Mitchell, Jack Hargreaves and Trevor the Weather into our living rooms. Advertising revenue flowed in and all was set fair for the next 22 years, until the franchise was re-advertised in 1980, when there was utter disbelief at the news Southern had lost its franchise to upstart TVS, a consortium of 3 television executives backed by Barclays Bank. Not surprisingly, relations between TVS and Southern were not exactly cordial. Southern was in shock because it had lost, and TVS was in shock because it had won. TVS arranged to buy Southern Studios, and a deal was grudgingly arranged, but in a fit of pique, Southern refused TVS access to its buildings in the run-up to the takeover, so it was forced to operate from temporary buildings in the Southern car park. TVS eventually got the keys to the door and took to the air on New Year's Day 1982, employing many of Southern's staff.
For the next 10 years, it produced a string of utterly unmemorable programmes, such as Bobby Davro in the Box, 5 Alive, It's a Dog's Life, and That's Love. Don't worry if you can't remember them. No one else can either. During its time on air, TVS made some bad business moves, among them buying Mary Tyler Moore's MTM company for nearly £200 million, a move which made it the owners of a huge catalogue of US drama series and cop shows at the exact moment they fell out of fashion. TVS profits turned into losses. 140 redundancies were announced and, to add to its problems, the franchise was re-advertised. By this time, Margaret Thatcher had come to power. She felt, while programme quality and artistic merit were all very well in their own way, there was nothing to beat the clank of hard cash. Accordingly, to much outrage, she announced the ITV franchises would be sold to the highest bidder. In the south, TVS bid the highest, £59 million a year for 10 years, the highest bid ever made by any applicant. In theory, The franchise should have automatically gone to it, but it had made too many messes on the carpet, and there were worries it wouldn't be able to keep up the all-important payments. Instead, the franchise was awarded to the runner-up, Meridian Broadcasting, which had bid only £36 million a year. TVS closed on December the 31st, 1992, its shares standing at just a few pence, compared with a previous high of more than £4. Its successor, Meridian Television, had no concerns over programme quality. It didn't make any. It is a programme publisher, buying in everything it broadcasts, Meridian Tonight being the only programme made locally. Meridian lost its on-air identity in 2002, being rebranded as ITV1, and in 2004, the Blair government allowed the regional ITVs, apart from Scotland and Northern Ireland, to become one big homogeneous blob based in London. Shamefully, regional ITV was killed off at a stroke, and part of Britain's cultural fabric disappeared. Today, the only time the word Meridian is seen on screen is during the local news. The studios at Southampton, known in southern days as the Fun Factory, were sold and demolished in 2010, and what was left of Meridian moved to a business park near Fareham, which just about says it all.
So we're now moving on to My View, and this is from Matthew Chatfield. The Ghost of a Long-Lost Countryside. On my wall is a small etching dated 1849. It shows my hometown of Ryde as depicted by local engraver George Brannan. On the skyline are the spires of St Thomas and the recently constructed Holy Trinity, and in the distance is Ryde Pier, with a steam vessel just visible docked at the end. The reason I am fascinated by this particular view is it is a snapshot of a town in flux. With 7,000 inhabitants, Ryde had trebled in size in just 30 years. Rows of neat Victorian dwellings can be seen where the fashionable and wealthy of the era were making their homes, and second homes, close to the Queen at Osborne. But the etching depicts the popular and rapidly growing resort from afar, across bucolic scenes of cattle grazing in the fields. In the foreground, a rough country lane winds by, and the figure of a farmhand can be seen approaching a hedge in the adjacent field. These features together tell a chapter in the story of the town. In the distance, the new busy urban centre is transforming the landscape apace. Nearby, the scene is as it might have looked 1,000 years earlier. The picture also allows the astute viewer to locate the artist quite precisely at the time the image was made, and thus a third chapter to the story can be told when we look at the image with the knowledge of what has happened in the 169 years since 1849. Within 20 years of Brannan's charming portrayal, most of the fields he drew were gone, turned into houses, parks and gardens. The tidal wave of development we see rolling down the hill in the etching did not stop. Indeed, it continued apace. The simple rustic track, bounded by leafy hedges, became what is now East Hill Road on the edge of St John's Park, a development of large villas. I now live in a small part of one of those grand houses, and I walk or drive along the road daily. Brannan's etching is often on my mind as I enjoy this green part of Ryde. The historic houses and gardens seem venerable and old, but the picture reminds me, of course, these houses, like so many others, were built on green fields where once cattle grazed. East Hill Road today is rarely quiet, but occasionally I'll stand outside my house late at night when the town is silent and nobody else is awake. I shut my eyes and the houses and modern street lamps fade from view. I feel the cool breeze blowing up from the seashore, hear the soughing of the wind in the trees, or maybe, at the right time of year, the faint sound of geese calling far out on the water. Those are the times when I can call up the ghost of a long-lost countryside I never knew, but thanks to the talents of a Victorian engraver, I can vividly imagine.
And now a column by Jake Harrison headlined "The Hippest Place to Be This Summer." Aren't we a lucky bunch of islanders? We've been spoilt rotten recently with the glorious weather and the brilliant efforts from our courageous lions out in Russia. So what better way to relax than in the sunshine with a refreshing drink at one of the island's new local bars? What's finer than a refreshing pint in the summer sun? It's properly British. Yes, a nice pint of lager, sat out in one of the many of the island's beer gardens, cheering on our nation until our throats are hoarse and our wallets very much destroyed. In my opinion, it's one of the finest pleasures of life. However, there's more to the island now than traditional pubs. There are also many new, hip, trendy bars popping up in most towns, serving fashionable food and a variety of flavoured and interesting sounding cocktails and flavoured gins. So my question is the island bar scene becoming fashionable again? Yes, it definitely is. 2 weeks ago, I took my mother out to lunch at the Hut in Colwell Bay. Yes, the food was lovely, the service was top notch, and the music was very trendy, pumping out the latest electronic beats. But the best thing about it was its youthfulness. It was amazing to see the place packed with young, vibrant energy. And this is why the island is bringing back its colourful and young-hearted spirit. This is why I believe the island's cocktail bar scene is as refreshing as ever. It's also so positive to see so many young entrepreneurs starting up new and exciting businesses. And this has got me thinking, why the island? Well, can you think of anywhere better to be in summer? I challenge you. There's beaches everywhere you turn, festivals and live music from new up-and-coming bands every single weekend, and a variety of restaurants and bars to choose from. This is also great for the Isle of Wight's tourism industry. So, will they last? Well, the problem, however, is that many people still have this stuck-in-the-past view of the island. Apparently, we seem to be just full of old people. But I believe the island is getting younger all the time. Most younger people these days prefer nightclubs, such as Fever and Boutique, and I believe introducing these new modern cocktail bars give younger adults, between the ages of 21 and 30 let's say, more variety and choice. From the invigorating Bottega bar in Ryde's Union Street, down to the uber-cool Driftwood Beach bar on Sandown's seafront, and even further down towards Pim's bar in Ventnor. The Coast Bar and Dining Room in Cowes is a fantastic place to spend a night out too. We're spoilt for choice. So why are they so popular? Cocktail bars are brilliant because they're fashionably fresh, modern and sociable, and most have a great and eclectic range of drinks to choose from, such as flavoured gins, rather than the bog standard pint of Foster's or JD and Coke. You could say it is as refreshing as the cocktails they serve to see so many hip bars popping up around the island.
And Behind the News by David Newbull, and saying work has finally begun converting Frank James Hospital into homes. Light at the end of the tunnel for a grand old building. It was named after a man who famously was killed by a rampaging elephant. One of the jewels in the crown of Victorian East Cowes, the Frank James Hospital, is slowly but surely coming back to life after years of laying derelict. The Grade 2 listed building, with its Victorian brick turrets and magnificent facade, was deemed to be surplus to the requirements of the NHS in 2002 when it was sold. However, when the economic crash took place a decade ago, the owners of the building became locked in a seemingly endless wrangle, leading to the hospital falling into a state of disrepair. However, light is now appearing at the end of the tunnel, thanks in part to a dedicated team of volunteers who helped to maintain the building during its wilderness years, but more recently to a Portsmouth builder who decided to rescue the building and convert it into homes. During the renovations at the site, builder Ian Wagland's team have discovered, among other things, a 50-metre long secret passage running from the basement of the former hospital to under the nearby Jubilee Recreation Ground. It is thought to have been built during the Second World War as an air raid shelter. However, what they also discovered was during the years when it had lain derelict, many historic fixtures and fittings had been removed. Items yet to be tracked down include a bell that used to be in the clock tower and a stone bench that once graced the entrance lobby. "We think it's in someone's back garden," said Ian. The building was constructed in 1893 as a home for retired seamen and was originally called the Frank James Memorial Home. It was named after explorer, adventurer and writer Frank James, who was killed in 1890 while on a big game hunt. In 1903, the home was transformed into a cottage hospital and was absorbed by the NHS in 1948, before finally closing and being sold to developers in 2002.
However, legal wrangles prevented the development from going ahead, and the condition of the building began to deteriorate. In 2012, the Friends of Frank James was formed, with the aim of preserving the building. Over the years, the group has helped maintain the grounds and tried to keep the building secure and watertight. However, when Ian and his team finally began turning the building into high-quality homes, they discovered a tree growing out of the roof from one of the wings, just one of many problems they had to solve. Ian's company, Wagtail Developments, is redeveloping the site on behalf of Charlemagne Estates. He became interested in the project when he had a conversation with one of the original owners of the site. He said, "I thought it was a nice building. I could see nobility in it. However, it was in a distressed state. The roof was leaking. There was all this creeper going into the cement." Ian also lavished praise on the Friends of Frank James for their work in helping to preserve the building. He said, "It has got to be a big thank you to them. They have done an amazing amount of work. They basically halted the decay, otherwise it would have gone under." Ian uses a small team of island tradespeople at the site and has respected the Victorian lines and features of the building, while at the same time making bright, modern, contemporary homes inside. He said, "Surprisingly, the roof was sound, but a lot of the inside of the building was not. When finished, there will be parking for up to 28 cars, and the inside of the building will be converted into a mixture of luxury flats and houses. He hopes around 90% of the work will be done by the end of August or the beginning of September this year." He said, "There's light now at the end of the tunnel. I am proud to have been a part of it."
And we're moving into what's on in the leisure world. World Music by Isle of Wight students. More than 100 island school children will perform alongside musicians from Musico Musica's World Music Academy at this year's Rhythm Tree Festival. A team of musicians from around the world is visiting the Isle of Wight to work with pupils from 4 primary schools as part of their World Music Academy on the Road project. St Helens, Barton Primary and the Nettleston and Newchurch Federated Primary Schools are participating in the project, which will end with a performance at Rhythm Tree tomorrow, that's Saturday. The WMA On the Road is a touring programme of workshops for clusters of schools targeting rural and isolated areas and regions which are challenged in addressing cultural diversity and have poor or limited access to world music. A project team of culture, tradition and musical experts led by Musico Musica's artistic directors Mauricio Venegas Astorga and Rachel Pantin will lead workshops and presentations for the primary school students.
And now an article by Kate Cranwell, headlined "Have Fun, Celebrating All Things Scottish and Celtic on the Island." So if you, like me, have a tart inside, you can celebrate it at the Island Highland Gathering on Sunday, July the 22nd. This is a hugely successful event, back for a 7th year, to celebrate all things Scottish and Celtic. Visitors can look forward to traditional Highland games, Scottish food and ice cream, whisky tasting, and, come rain or shine, the sights and sounds of pipers, drummers and dancers filling the grounds of Northwood House in Cowes. With the support of Red Funnel, Scottish dancers, Irish dancers and pipe and drum bands will be arriving from all over the country, including Reading, Bristol, Portsmouth and Hampshire. There's a chance to see the island's own Medina Marching Band, as well as the popular Wight Hot Pipes, plus a reenactment from the 42nd Regiment of Foot, the Black Watch, falconry from frequent flyers and a display of classic cars. Apart from the pipe and drum competition, one of the highlights is the Highland Games, kindly organised by the Strong Room in Newport. If you're up for a fun challenge, it involves tossing a few cables and hurling some haggis, and everyone's welcome to have a go. Refreshments will be needed after all that, so head to the barbecue organised by Vectis Sunrise Rotary and the bar for a wee dram, or enjoy tea and cakes in Northwood House and browse the island craft stalls in the grounds. This year's Island Highland Gathering will be officially opened by Lord Lieutenant Major General Sir Martin Wight from 11 a.m. The Island Highland Gathering is organised by a small committee entirely to raise money for Isle of Wight charities and to bring something different to the island. Grab your kilt and go along from 10 a.m. until 5 p.m. to show your support. Tickets are available online at www.islandhighlandgathering.com or at the gate on the day.
Pam's exciting musical plans. A world-renowned musician and composer is organising a charity evening of jazz, swing and Latin in the West Wight. Pam Wedgwood, who has written more than 200 books on music and played the French horn and piano professionally for more than 25 years, moved to Freshwater Bay 8 months ago. She has become a trustee of the West Wight Arts Association with her son Ollie, performing his Ollie Wedgwood Trio at the Memorial Hall Freshwater on Saturday, July the 28th from 6:45 p.m. in aid of the Alzheimer Cafe. Pam, 71, said, "Last year I became very ill with a lymphoma cancer. I was diagnosed several years ago, but it's a controllable cancer which only requires treatment every few years, if I am lucky, which I have been. But with amazing treatment and the help of God, I came through with renewed vigour and determination to carry on with my life. I had a caravan in Newbridge and loved the West Wight, so I decided to move to the island and buy a large enough house to start my own music residential courses, a dream I've had for many years. I've just held my first piano mini break. It's never too late to play piano. The response was great, with people even coming from the mainland. Pam was born in Skegness and started playing the piano at 11. A few years later she took on the French horn and later the cello. She played in brass bands before moving on to orchestral music. She later taught and coached youth orchestra, as well as composing with Faber Music, taking on an instrumental series she had written in 1985. Pam added, "I have a variety of courses planned for later this year, run from my home, where I have several garden huts for practice sessions. I have a new book entitled How to Play Jazz Piano coming out in September, and have a vocal day with a concert at Christchurch, Totland in October, where I am hoping to get 100 singers performing music from Les Miserables. It's an exciting time ahead." Tickets for jazz, swing and Latin are £10 for adults and £5 for under 16s. Call 754 767 or email pamwedgwood, that's all one word, at yahoo.co.uk.
And that's all we've got time for this week, so it's goodbye from me, Stephen.
And goodbye from Madeline.
Goodbye.
This is the BBC.
This is In Touch, the magazine programme for people like me who are blind or partially sighted. I'm Peter Wight. Thanks for downloading this week's edition. Good evening, and time for the news. But it's not always in English. We'll be putting your questions about this to the BBC's Head of Current Affairs. And a debut performance at the Proms, which start this week. How does a blind instrumentalist learn a complex arrangement using Braille music?
The answer is any way I can. So my first port of call is to read the score. And again, and again, and again. And it's a long process of reading before I ever pick up an instrument.
More from Kate Risdon later in the programme. But first, the complexities of EU negotiations, the politics and science of nerve gas, and a daring rescue in the caves of Thailand. Following international news stories is complicated enough as it is, but it's impossible if whole sections of TV news reports are in a foreign language. We've been contacted by blind people who are interested in foreign affairs but find that news programmes regularly put translations on screen as subtitles, but offer no spoken English translation, which means we can't follow the story. In Touch listener Don Heffernan told us about his efforts to keep up to date with the Salisbury poisoning case.
I was recently listening to a Newsnight report. Somebody who's a reporter for the BBC who speaks Russian, and he had that day spoken to this young lady in Russia, and the conversation went on for about 15 minutes, and that was totally and utterly subtitled. So I might as well not have even started to listen to that programme.
That was Don Heffernan. Another listener, Martin Barber, is a big admirer of the work of the BBC's chief international correspondent, Lise Doucette. And he was looking forward to her two-part programme, Syria, the World's War.
Almost as soon as the programme started, it became clear that it was going to use a lot of archive footage with Arabic speakers, and that the Arabic would be translated into subtitles, which I obviously can't read, being blind. There was nothing to enable me to find out what the Arabic speakers were actually saying.
Well, we have someone who is responsible for current affairs programmes to answer some of those questions. Joe Carr is the BBC's head of current affairs. Joe, first of all, BBC Hoshek Stobu Kak Można Bolshe Ludej Poniamala a Ciom Gavritsi Navashnik Program Nitakli.
How dare you? I've got no idea what you're saying to me, Peter.
I didn't think you would. To be honest, I have no idea what I'm saying myself, except that this is in Russian, and that's exactly the kind of experience that Don and Martin are talking about. The question was, doesn't the BBC want all people to enjoy its current affairs programmes?
Yes, I absolutely do want as many people as possible to enjoy our current affairs content, and I'm grateful to your audience for actually being part of that group of people. In the case of Newsnight and the interview with Victoria Skripal, the cousin of Julia Skripal, this was a very late-breaking interview. The reporter Gabriel Gatehouse conducted the interview in Russian himself. So from our point of view, that was a very urgent situation. The imperative was to get that interview to air. I think Gabriel was the only journalist who managed to speak to Victoria Skripal, and there the imperative was just to get it out as quickly as possible.
Presumably the imperative is also all the things the BBC normally has to check, that people aren't libelling people, that they're accurate. Those are all things that matter just as much in as far as getting it to all your listeners as well, aren't they?
That's right. I suppose the point here, though, is that dubbing is a slightly time-consuming process, and in that kind of time window, in terms of actually just being able to cut the interview and get it to air as quickly as possible, I just don't think it was logistically possible to dub in that particular situation.
Wouldn't the translation exist, though, somebody could just nip into a studio and read, couldn't they?
That's true, although you've then got to factor in the fact you've got to put that translation onto the edit, and you've also got to factor in the fact that presumably the Russian speaker in that situation was Gabriel, who was also then thinking about his live commentary and about which sections of the interview would be cut and how it would be edited.
So that would be true of that case, but it wouldn't surely be true of a two-part, very carefully crafted programme like the one that Lise Doucette did.
Yes, I agree with that, and I'd like to apologise to Martin Barber, because I think that is something that we should have thought about far more carefully. Obviously, there is a balance to be struck sometimes between hearing the emotion in speakers' voices and hearing their authentic voices, but I do accept that when we have programmes which are a long time in the making, we've really got to think more carefully about these questions of accessibility.
Because I've often heard that argument, the argument about authenticity, but of course there is no authenticity at all for a blindness who can't understand what is being said.
Yes, well, I think these things are a balance, but I do think in this case that we didn't get that balance quite right, because it is important that our content is accessible. But as I say, I think on this occasion we really could have done a bit better.
Well, we can talk to Gareth Ward-Williams, who's the head of BBC's Accessibility for Design. Is it enough for departments to say it's too hard, or as Joe just said, there wasn't time?
I think the BBC often, the DG talks about the BBC being for everybody, and it's something that we have, previous DGs have always talked about, and that universality is something that's very, very important.
Well, come on, Gareth, do you have to do it or not?
I think where it is possible, it should be done. This is one of those things where, as Joe's already said, that more could have been done. We may be missing things like specific guidelines. We need to have a look into this, or a guide on best practice of how to approach this. And I think this is an opportunity, and this is always why I always encourage people to contact the BBC with any issues that they ever have, because it's the best way for us to know whether we're doing the right thing or not. And I think
but I know that the BBC have been contacted about this many, many times by blind people, and so have we on In Touch. And what we would say is, it still happens.
Yeah, and I think it's, and I'm sure Joe will agree, now is a really good time to have a good conversation about actually why is this not happening.
Subtitling for people with hearing loss, for example, is pretty much taken for granted now on most programmes. We know the automated subtitling can make mistakes, but it's accepted, it's a duty, provide it wherever possible, and it is possible, isn't it?
Oh, it is possible, and this is, I think, where things are possible. They should be done. But as Joe's pointed out, already in one case there was a possibility there, and on the other one, there was less possibility, and therefore, it didn't happen. And there's always going to be a little bit of a grey area. But I think you're right. At the end of the day, more can be done, more should be done. So we need to work out why it's not being done.
Can I just press you on whether it's a grey area that everybody who possibly can should have full access to all the BBC's output, and that therefore saying that blind people every now and again just have to accept that they won't be able to isn't good enough?
There's a lovely word, equivalence, with a CE at the end. I think everyone should have an equivalent experience of the BBC. You should be able to access the same information. There may be slightly different paths to it. Giving people options and giving people opportunities to get to the content, I think, is really important. You're right.
Yeah, Joe Carr, do you think it's enough just to talk about it, or do we actually need firm guidelines, almost BBC regulations, that say you have to do it?
I think you have to have the conversation first, because obviously we have to get to the root of what's going on here before we can work out how to effectively address it.
Haven't we had the conversation?
Well, certainly in current affairs, what I'm going to do as a result of this is I've invited Gareth and a colleague to come and speak to the senior leaders in the current affairs department, and that I think will feed into the thinking that Gareth is doing around is there a best practice guide that we need to circulate? Do we need to raise the profile of this issue among our producers?
And do you think maybe we need to change the culture in news to some extent to make them realise being first isn't always ideal if it's not inclusive?
I think these things are always a balance, and Peter, I wouldn't really be telling you the truth if I said that you can usefully say to journalists, don't be first. That is part of the DNA of news. Having said that, as you say, it is a balance with accessibility, and I think the only sensible way to approach that is on a case-by-case basis.
But you can reassure Don and Martin and all the people who've complained about this that there will be very serious consideration given to it after this broadcast.
Absolutely, and I'm grateful for them to drawing it to my attention.
That was BBC Head of Current Affairs, Joanna Carr. And before that, Gareth Ford-Williams of Accessibility and Design. Do keep your examples of this coming. We want to keep an eye on this story. And several of you got in contact about our recent visit to Microsoft's HQ in Reading, where we tried out some of the latest assistive technology aimed at us. Brian Gaff runs a talking newspaper and he emailed us to say,
I don't have a smartphone and I'm a little worried about the group of people who are not comfortable with these new devices, who increasingly seem to be ignored. With everything being online and nobody giving telephone support anymore, it's becoming increasingly difficult to carry on if you are blind but can't use modern tech.
And from the other end of the technological spectrum, Mark emailed about the section of our visit to Microsoft when Lucy Edwards tried out the navigation app Soundscape.
During the item, you raised concerns about the loss of perception caused by having to use headphones. I've been impressed by bone conducting headphones. These work by sitting on the bone in front of your ear and transmitting the sound through vibration. They're a way to get lots of audio information in real time from mobile technology while keeping the ability to hear the sounds of what is physically around you.
Do keep those reactions coming. Now, so many blind people have made highly successful careers from music that some people seem to think it goes with the territory. If you're blind, you must be musical. Not so, of course. You still need enormous talent and application to rise to the top. But there is something new about the way blind flautist Kate Risdon is making her name. Kate is one of the 6 disabled members of BSO Resound, Bournemouth Symphony Orchestra's new ensemble, making the BSO the first symphony orchestra in the world to have a professional disabled-led ensemble as a part of its makeup. A highlight will be a performance at this year's proms, which start on Friday. Our reporter, Tom Walker, has been to the Spire Methodist Church in Poole, Dorset, where BSO Resound were having their final dress rehearsal for a performance.
Phil, could I have an A? Could you give me an A?
One thing that occurs to me, Kate, when I was watching you, is there's obviously a visual relationship between most of the ensemble and the conductor, but obviously in your case that isn't happening.
No, it's a totally different relationship. The conductor's role is also partly, of course, to get out of the ensemble what he wants during rehearsal time. And so, obviously, that is done sometimes through speech and describing what they want. So, for me, conductors' gestures are largely, I suppose, received through the medium of sound, sometimes because I can hear the conductor breathe or move, and other times because the response of the ensemble means that I know what is being gestured by the conductor. And that's the same for this ensemble as it is for choral concerts that I've done in the past as well, and all kinds of concerts, you know, to sense what's going on and react to it immediately.
We now come to Bach's orchestral suites, and the second suite in B minor. Bach was amongst the first composers to use the flute as the instrument that we recognise today in the modern orchestra.
Thinking about accessing the music, I noticed that the other 5 members of the ensemble had the print copy of the music in front of them. You, of course, had the braille but weren't able to use it. That must be an extraordinary feat of memory.
That's absolutely standard. Musicians tend not to memorise because there's no need. They're phenomenally trained sight readers, and there's no need for them to memorise every single score. And the fact is that if you're a professional orchestral musician, so much music passes under your fingers that there simply wouldn't be chance or time to memorise all of it. So, as well as being phenomenal instrumentalists, musicians are, professionally at least, in classical music, awesome sight readers. So, yes, I have braille scores, and as we said, those are for the purpose of committing the music to memory and reference in rehearsal.
How do you go about committing the music to memory?
Lots of other people do it. I mean, opera singers do it, and dancers do it, and actors remember their script. So I'm not alone. The answer is any way I can. So my first port of call is to read the score. And again, and again, and again. And it's a long process of reading before I ever pick up an instrument.
Have you ever had an occasion when you've been performing when you've just simply had that kind of brain fade and forgotten the score?
We don't talk about those. It's bad karma. I have 3 more concerts to do this week.
We don't want to think about the occasions.
We don't think... I haven't. Mostly, if the memories returned at the very last moment. I have dreams about that kind of thing. It's not funny.
The BSO Resound Ensemble comprises 6 exclusively disabled people. Do you feel in some ways that that's quite segregationist? Would you prefer to be in a mainstream audience?
No, let's not even go there. As far as I'm concerned, once you get in the rehearsal room and you're playing music, there are, we don't talk about disability, we don't think about it, we're so busy doing music. And the standard is not compromised, and the point of it is that actually there really isn't any difference at that point. How we get here, how we deal with access issues, how we deal with memorisation issues, how we deal with all the rest of that is simply stuff that each of us deals with to get here. So I don't particularly feel that I'm in a segregated ensemble. I actually feel, for the first time ever, that I have been included by a mainstream orchestra on an equal basis to all their other musicians, and I have to say that is absolutely life-changing. We have to be respectful and accommodating of one another's requirements in order to enable the ensemble to function. But on a musical and artistic basis, I don't even think about it.
Do you think, it might be symptomatic of the industry that BSO has had to think about doing this?
No. I think it's actually, well, if it is, I think BSO is absolutely trailblazing. It wasn't me that has been pushed for this. It was the orchestra who put out a call. I went for audition. So it's not like, we want some disabled musicians and we're prepared to accept, a slightly lower standard. No, they weren't. They auditioned, and they've got people here who are at professional level, disability or no disability.
What are your ambitions in the medium and long term?
I would really like to think that the Resound Ensemble will continue, and I'm hopeful that it will. But as a freelancing musician, I think most of us are wary of medium and long-term goals.
Looking at the more immediate term, you've got a number of concerts coming up in schools, and then in August you're playing at the Royal Albert Hall.
Yes.
How are you feeling about those commitments right now?
That's something I can't quite put into words. Who knew I would be asked to do that? It's amazing. It's like going, I suppose it's the musical equivalent of the Paralympics. That if your preparation is good, hopefully everything will come right on the day.
Kate Risdon ending her chat with Tom Walker on a harmonious note. And there'll be many more of those from BSO Resound when they play at the Royal Albert Hall as part of the Proms on Monday the 27th of August. That's it for today. You can call our action line for 24 hours after tonight's programme on 0800 044 044. You can email in touch at bbc.co.uk, or you can click on Contact Us on our website, from where you can also download tonight's and other editions of the programme. That's it from me, Peter Wight, producer Kevin Corr and the team. Goodbye.